It is time for the dazzling highlight of the inauguration of the SLMA Oration 2024. It is on Global Divide in Health and Research, Ethical and Governance Challenges for Low and Middle Income Countries. And it will be presented by an esteemed member of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, Professor Athula Sumathipala. The citation for the orator will now be presented by Dr. Ananda Vijayavikrama, the President of the SLMA.
Chief guest, guest of honor, past presidents and members of the council. I'm privileged to introduce Professor Athula Sumathipala to this audience as the SLMA orator of this occasion. Professor Athula Sumathipala entered the Faculty of Medicine, Colombo from Nalanda College in 1975. He was graduated with MBBS in 1980 and obtained Diploma in Family Medicine in 1985 and MD in Family Medicine by Research in 1981 and was board certified as a specialist in family medicine in 1992. He migrated to UK in 1991 and underwent training in psychiatry at a Centre of Excellence in Psychiatry at the Mondesley and Bethlehem Royal Hospitals, London. He obtained the MRC Psych UK in 1996, received certificate of completion of specialist training in the UK as a specialist psychiatrist in 1999. He conducted his PhD research on delivering cognitive behavior therapy for medically unexplained symptoms and obtained a PhD from University of London in 2004. He was the only Sri Lankan to receive H.B. William Travelling Professorship from Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists in 2007. He was honored with an honorary fellowship from Sri Lankan College of General Practitioners in 2008, fellowship of Royal College of Psychiatrists UK in 2018, and was awarded the honorary fellowship of Ceylon College of Family Physicians in 2023. He is currently the director of the Institute of Research and Development in Health and Social Care in Colombo, which he co-founded 24 years ago. He also serves as the chairman, National Institute of Fundamental Studies, Hantana Kandy, since January 2020. In addition, he has held key academic positions as the Professor of Psychiatry, Research Institute of Primary Care and Health Sciences, Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, Keele University, UK, from September 2014 to April 2021, and he voluntarily retired, prematurely retired, I would say, to support COVID operations in Sri Lanka, and currently an active emeritus professor in psychiatry, Keele University, UK. And he's also the emeritus professor of global mental health, King's College, London, UK, since 2014. And he's a member of the regional expert group on mental health of WHO Southeast Asia region, and the visiting professor in psychiatry and biomedical research at the Faculty of Medicine, Kothalavala Defence University, and he also in the advisory committee member of KDU CARE since 2020. He has also held the post of Associate Editor, British Journal of Psychiatry, the first Sri Lankan to hold this since the inception of the journal, and he was appointed as the co-editor of Ceylon Medical Journal in 2022. He was elected as the Secretary General of International Society of Twin Research since 2024. His research interests are centered on interconnected disciplines. These are the epidemiology of chronic disease and multimorbidity, especially physical and mental illness combinations, evaluation and implementation of complex interventions using twin method in study of illness etiology, and ethics-related research. Most of his research up to now has been based in Sri Lanka. He has earned recognition internationally as an expert in above fields. In addition, he is validated by UNESCO as an expert in bioethics and was a member of editorial board of Asian Bioethics Review published by the National University of Singapore. Previously, he has delivered 3 SLMA orations, twice Professor N.D.W. Lionel Memorial Oration in then Sir Marcus Fernando Oration, and also he has done the oration at the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine titled CBT for Medically Unexplained Symptoms. And he has won many awards, which are numerous, and also he had been a speaker of many conferences and plenaries, both nationally and internationally. And also he is a member of the WHO Working Group on Ethical Issues in Research and Surveillance, member of the Planning Committee of the Global Forum of Bioethics in Research, and also served as one of the 2 advisors of the Welcome Open collection of the series of articles outlining the discussion and outcome from each session presented at the meeting. And he has won many research grants, over 10 from Wellcome Trust, and has more than 150 peer-reviewed publications and book chapters in books published, including books published by the Oxford and Cambridge University Press. In addition to all this, he writes poems, and he's a lyric writer and produced album titles Piyawara, where songs are sung by leading vocalists. He considers his greatest contribution throughout his academic and research career is the establishment of the Institute of Research and Development in Sri Lanka and the Sri Lankan Twin Registry. This infrastructure now complements his efforts by promoting capacity building through a card of high caliber junior academics. As he puts it, trees, those will grow taller than him. I have the pleasure and privilege of inviting Professor Sumathipala to deliver this prestigious SLMA oration.
Excuse me. Good morning to everybody. Thank you, Mr. President, for kind words. Chief guest, Dr. Sumathipala. Guest of honor, Dr. Shalala from the WHO. Past presidents, council members, teachers, foreign delegates, colleagues, and friends. I consider it as an honor and a privilege to be selected to deliver this oration, and also glad that the script I submitted is very much in line with the Congress theme, equity. I'm not going to follow the tradition of reading through a script. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story. It's a narrative. The context of this oration, it's focused on bioethics with a special focus on research ethics based on the work done over the last 25 years based at the Institute of Research and Development in Health and Social Care. The data from studies on global divide in health and health research, underrepresentation of low and middle income country in the research literature, disaster-related research, informed consent, governance in data sharing and biobanking, public understanding of research including genomic research will be the areas I will be covering. Most of this work has been published, creating a global impact. These are some of the papers just to visualize the contribution. and also published in books to ethics, authored, edited by the leaders in ethics research and published in prestigious institutions. And these are some of them. And particularly taking a stand from the low and middle income country and voicing our concerns and rights. However, those were meant to be beyond publication and for journal impact, for a culture shift, research for people's benefit. Impact on policy, impact on behavioral aspect of decision making, impact on the stakeholders, the wider community, and the impact on wider capacity building. So what is global health? What is it for? The global health is a field of study, research, and practice that places a priority on achieving equity in health for all people. However, the central issue is this 1090 divide, as we call it, the stark and multifaceted divide between the global north and the global south. In terms of health outcomes, resources, access to health care, nature of prevalent diseases, research funding, research publications, and authorships, most of all, ownership of research and the data. So the equity in the context of globalization, the sad reality is this. Despite spectacular progress in science and technology during the 20th century, as we enter the 21st century, I'm quoting, the world is most inequitable than it was 50 years ago. Disparities in wealth and health within and between nations are widening, and the rapidly expanding global economy has failed to reduce poverty and improve health for all. This is evident in both in terms of access to health care of individuals and in relation to health of the whole populations. Billions of people in degrading poverty with little if at any access to health care, which is somewhat different in Sri Lankan setting, but I'm talking about the global situation. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights remains an unrealized aspiration for majority of the world population. So unquote, it's from Professor Solomon Benita, a South African famous professor in bioethics. The bitter reality is that richest 1% grabbed nearly 2/3 of all new wealth worth $42 trillion created since 2020, almost twice as money as the bottom 99% of the world population. And it continues, the global divide, the 1090 which I told you, expenditure on research, 90% is spent on 16% of population, which bears 7% of global disease. You might say, this is an old reference, 99, I deliberately did it. Recent ones, high-income countries account for 80% of global spending. LAMIC share increased only from 13 to 19%. So this is the inequity we are talking about. And it's the same for research funding. Over 90% of world potential years lost life belong to our part of the world, but only 10% of global research funds come to our part of the world. The Global Observatory on Health and Development reveals stark disparities in global health, research funding, resource allocation, and capacity. It's alarming. The grants for health research by major international funders in 2020 showed LAMIC received only 0.2 of all grant funding. You may be surprised. Only 0.2 of all grant funding for NCD was allocated to institutions in LAMICs. Funding for neglected tropical diseases remain at 0.6%. But the good news is, there is a trend by UK funding agencies, namely all these, and there are many Sri Lankan recipients other than our research groups and partners. So the ethical challenge refers to situation in which is morally wrong and still one has to make a choice. Ethical challenge occurs when one has to behave and act in the best way under the circumstances while trying to make a change. So our behaviors trying to make a change is the narrative you are going to hear from me the rest of the time. It was teamwork, work celebrating over 25 years, and that's again the narrative. Why do we need to focus on ethics and governance? Because knowledge is power. We all know that. That is why global health and research should be viewed through an ethical lens. That is why ethics and governance are essential prerequisites for global health and health research. The field of ethics, the so-called moral philosophy, involves systematizing, defending, and recommending concepts of right and wrong behaviors. We all know right and wrong behaviors are not universal. They are reshaped by the culture and many different things. Principles of ethics, I am not going to take you through. You all know this is bread and butter. But I am going to talk to you about the big picture, beyond basics, beyond information leaflets, beyond consent. The objective of this oration is to examine and discuss research ethics in the context of international collaborative research in our part of the world. The broader theme include as the conference theme, equality, equity, and the real justice is actually removing all barriers. Cultural sensitivity, absolutely important. Skills that permit us to learn about, understand others who come from different cultural backgrounds. Research agenda, who sets it. Exploitation, data ownerships, and authorships, as I told you. So ethics is beyond philosophy. And working for evidence-based ethics is very important. And I'm going to describe you how we navigated these challenges working together. Beyond philosophy, when I say beyond philosophy, when it comes to research questions, there are two concepts that are very important to sociologists: normative and empirical statements. The normative statements generally expressed as value judgment, which is mostly ethics is about. Empirical statements are informative and facts-based. So therefore, empirical bioethics incorporate empirical research methods to investigate ethical issues. Traditionally, the bioethics has relied heavily on philosophical analysis and ethical theory to address more questions in the field, moral questions in the field. However, empirical bioethics seeks to complement this by integrating empirical data into ethical analysis. And the sources are surveys, interviews, observational research, experimentation, etc. By collecting and analyzing empirical data, empirical bioethics aim to better understand the perspective and experience of stakeholders involved in ethical issues. This can help inform more nuanced ethical analysis and decision-making by taking into account the real-world circumstances and diverse perspectives, the bitter truth and the ground reality. By bridging the gap between theory and practice, empirical bioethics contribute to more informed and contextual sensitive ethical deliberations and policy development in health, care, and biomedical research. With that background introduction, let me now move to examine ethical challenges and dilemmas in global health research, what we call empirical bioethics, research into ethical issues. We went and analyzed mental health publications over 3 years. You all know 90% of the world is low and middle income country, but you will be surprised to learn that these journals, the so-called high impact journals, publish only 6% of literature from 90% of the world. Where is the problem? Understanding the percentage. Is it submission? Is it quality? Or is it selection bias? We looked into this. 3 European journals confirmed that just over 10% of all submissions were from LAMIC. So there's a submission bias. Acceptance rates from LAMIC was less than European journals. So there's a selection bias. Archives of General Psychiatry didn't want to give their data. Acceptance bias may have partly explained the finding that the commonest origin of Islamic articles in US journals comes from nations with close political and academic ties with USA. So there is politics in this, whether we like it or not. Then we thought maybe this is mental health. We went and analyzed the big journals, JAMA, New England Journal, BMJ, to find the same results. Only 6.5% of research come from 90% of the global population. The impact, this publication brought the world attention to the issues of severe underrepresentation of Islamic in health literature. We repeated the survey 2014 to 2016. Mental health publications, we analyzed 11 journals this time. It increased only from 6.5 to 15%. We went and analyzed the medical journals, the same ones. It increased from 6.5 to 12%. So, 15% of research from 90% of the population. Is it good enough? But it's not good enough for us. Are you satisfied with that? What is it? Is it evidence-based medicine or evidence-biased medicine? A serious thing to question. So I'm going to tell a side story now. Decolonizing evidence, we need more local evidence. That's why the Ceylon Medical Journal had this workshop on the 13th, which was extremely successful, oversubscribed. And thank you, Ananda, for suggesting it and also supporting it. We want to see that we have homegrown future research leaders taking this challenge, swimming against the tide. Coming back to the journal analysis, other ethical issues, 40 original research publications had no information about countries of origin of data. Most of these articles were large multi-center, multi-country trials led by teams based in USA. More evident in US journals, and majority were from New England Journal of Medicine. Other ethical issues, 37 original papers in the medical literature had no author from Islamic, although the research was done. We call it parachute research. The semi-colonial model. Clearly an ethical issue, should have been looked into by the journal editors, because the data ownerships and ethical data sharing is crucial in international collaborative research. So the BMJ, not me, call it scientific imperialism, which exists whether we like it or not. And it was very evident during COVID. The original agreement was whoever finds the vaccine must share it. You will be surprised to hear high-income countries, 30% of the global population reserved 51% of the doses even before they were produced. Will you believe that? However, we were lucky. We had all three doses. Ananda, part credit goes to you, and so that you are here, epidemiology. So this is the bitter truth, whether people like it or not. So, bioethics, power, and injustice. So I have redefined the vulnerability. We generally know that doctors have a power over patients. The researchers have power over research participants. But ethics review committees have power over researchers. And most of it, I have shown you evidence that high-income countries have power over our part of the world. So therefore, the vulnerability, which is traditionally defined as those who bear unequal burden in research because they are readily available, and the conventional belief is it's prison mates, mentally ill, disaster-affected populations. No, people, our part of the world, the low and middle income countries, we are vulnerable because there are a lot of parachute research taking place. So therefore, again, we have defined the vulnerability and respect for autonomy and dignity. A low and middle income collaborating partners' freedom of thoughts and action should be respected by the high income country researchers and must respect the right of Islamic collaborating partners who can make decisions and exercise that freedom. However, the high income country researchers must take special measures to protect vulnerable LAMIC partners whose freedom of choice may be limited, or those less capacity to choose. When pounds and dollars speaks, we are vulnerable, but I'll show evidence that we have never given in. We have brought millions of pounds to this country, but on equal footing and equal playing grounds. That's the ethics we are talking about. And research priority setting, who decide and how. There is ethical element in exploring ethics of global health research priority setting. That itself is an ethical issue. So therefore, we went and examined two important areas in published research: ethics, review committees, and informed consent in research carried out in Sri Lanka. We analyzed this and published, obviously took ethical clearance from both UK and here. The study has two parts. One is the Medline search. I'm not going to go into too much of details, you can see the slides. And also analyzed the CMJ and went and analyzed the thesis published in PGIM. Results: out of Medline search, there were 367, 250 were human subjects. Unfortunately, only 111 was full text. The so-called open access journals, we have to pray through our nose. So we had only the abstract, so we went and analyzed, finally 79 papers. Only 38% had documented about ethical approval, and only 39% had documented about informed consent. Ceylon Medical Journal, we analyzed the papers. Initially in 1999, only 2 of the 13 papers had documented ECR approval. 2005, this increased, and again, informed consent. This is not trying to find fault. When I did my MD in 1988, I had absolutely no clue about ethics. I didn't have ethical clearance for my MD. So that was the sad reality at that time. We went and analyzed the PGIM thesis from 85 to 2005. 34% had documented ECR approval and 61 had documented consent. So there was a trend in increasing ethical approval and consent documentation. However, documentation of approval not being present doesn't necessarily mean it was not taken. They may have not reported it. Even though International Committee of Medical Journal requires ACR approval and informed consent to be documented, most of the international journals don't do that. And we did the follow-up survey as well last year. And the good news is things have become better. 89% have documented ECR approval. The trend is very happy. Same with CMJ. I'm not going to burden with you the statistics, but I just wanted to show that, the data is there if anybody wants. PGIM thesis is the most satisfying thing. 74 MDs in 22 and 23. 97.31 documented ECR approval and consent. What made the difference? The PGIM established Ethics Review Committee. Then we went and did research into informed consent. This is empirical bioethics. Spoke to ethics committees in Sri Lanka. We recruited 29, more than what we anticipated, medical and non-medical members. There were about 60, so we wanted to have 1/3 and ended up having 50% participants. The members were from all the ethics committees in Sri Lanka. The participants were from diverse groups, males, females, senior colleagues. The most agreed that copy of information leaflet consent form should accompany the research proposal. Most believed all research need ethical approval, but identified limited human resource, time, and inadequate capacity. However, a bit surprisingly, 52% believe written consent is not required for all research, and verbal consent suggested as an alternative. Then we spoke to them. I'm not going to take you through the full list. what they believe as requirements for information leaflet. You can see description of the research project, what is one is doing, and so on. So for any colleague who want to do research can go through this and form their information leaflet to cover. This is locally generated information by our colleagues who are experts on ground. Then we also went and got consensus about what components are required in the consent form. Because you know the US consent form is a mile long. That's to cover litigation. But this is again local recommendation. Then we went and compared the WHO checklist with what the ethics committee members agreed. And you can see what was agreed. So, the discussion, most participants acknowledge that the ECR they serve, submitting the information leaflet and consent form with the study protocol was important. However, they believe lack of critical mass, adequate capacity hampers proper functioning. They believe that there should be an increase of critical mass, increased contribution to training, adequate educational reference material, increased awareness, and most ECR members rated most components of the WHO checklist was appropriate to our part of the world. However, we did another piece of work where reservations were expressed by the current informed consent practices. We examined the opinion of international academics who collaborated with us and who were sensitive to ethical issues. And we also posed these questions in Harvard School of Public Health international website. Then we categorized this into different things, and 14 participants posted 17 responses. They were from different parts of the world. I'm not saying this is very comprehensive, but it's a snapshot, and the results were that when we analyzed this, current practices and existing models, reservations was expressed about the current informed consent practices. The repeated theme which came up was conflict of interest. One verbatim example, they said most cases researchers from developing countries bring about conflict of interest who always work on strict deadlines. While respecting the ethics of developed countries, especially in the protocol stage, the researchers in developing countries tend to overlook these ethics in their research for several reasons. Researchers in the developing countries are actually not aware of these issues or just ignore them for convenience. The quality control bodies are not active enough, so these issues are not taken up. An informed consent is an issue which is usually given attention in the protocol stage, but once that is done, approved, people can ignore it. So the themes emerge were these three things with international collaborations. So therefore, the challenges in global health and ethics and governance, one of the major challenges would be conflict of interest. That may be implicit or explicit. So managing this conflict of interest among researchers and funders and other stakeholders may influence the research conduct, decision, and outcomes. Now I'm going to take you through a true classic case study where we witness all this: vulnerability, conflict of interest, exploitation, and ethical challenges. This is the reality. All the concerns we expressed before were seen post-tsunami, because there were two tidal waves. One was the real tidal wave, the second was the man-made tide. And when it comes to disasters, destruction, death, disease, displacement, disappearance, disarray, all these have ethical issues. So we couldn't turn a blind eye. We made an informed choice. Yes, we did. In the short term, that created some enemies. However, on the long term, we made strong friends and also ended up developing disaster research guidelines which exist outside USA, the only guidelines. For us, ignorance and arrogance are two extremes. Ignorance can be corrected through awareness raising, genuine ignorance, but the arrogance cannot be, and it has to be named and shamed. That's why I said we made an informed choice. We took this case to Indian Council of Medical Research International Conference. This was the case. A renowned university from the West, not the West, high-income country, they wanted to identify biological markers of stress, and they were collecting blood down south. A brave young epidemiologist confiscated these blood samples, and matter was referred to the Ministry of Health and the Center for National Operations, where I was manning the psychosocial desk. To circumvent lack of permission from the ministry, the foreign investigators identified a local collaborator and an institution, NGO, to carry out this unethical research. Founder and the head of the NGO was a close relative of the collaborator. He was also a chair of ethics committee in Sri Lanka. I'm not going to name it. It's open secret. Documents that foreign investigators finally submitted to ECR was evidence of ethical approval from sponsoring country obtained before tsunami. They had no ethical clearance for sponsoring country for a collaborative study post-tsunami. The ministry did not allow permission to take. In fact, we put an ambush at the customs, but unfortunately they had smuggled blood before that and articles were published. However, to raise awareness, just after tsunami, this is January, the College of General Practitioners, SLMA, we got together and made a big cry about these possibilities, but it happened. We gave evidence at the Parliamentary Select Committee and managed to get into Disaster Act about research, ethics, everything. It's part of it now. And that's where the stakeholder engagement is very important. We took the campaign to the world. We were invited to write a Lancet editorial. We took it around. But criticizing, exposing alone is not going to make a difference. That's the ethical challenge. And we convened this group locally, regionally, did a lot of awareness raising funded by the Wellcome Trust. You can see the stakeholders, senior colleagues. We took all the, we didn't allow any stone unturned to make a difference. You can see we had the support of senior colleagues here. We brought experts from the region together and had a 2-day consensus generation workshop which developed post-disaster ethics guidelines and which was published in the Asian Bioethics Review, special review invited, in which we published these things. So the impact and the significance is only disaster-related guidelines. This is the one existing outside. And we brought out the thing that disaster-affected populations are necessarily vulnerable because the American guidelines doesn't believe so. However, we have said that post-disaster research is important. It should happen and can happen under robust ethical framework. We took it to Europe as well. So in summary, the challenges of ethical research and governance, cultural differences, power imbalances, resource constraints, and regulatory gaps. That's why to face these challenges, accountability and transparency is absolutely must. Trust generated through reliable, competent, and integrity. However, remember research misconduct and plagiarism can happen. Sometimes when you apply for a grant, I have had this personal experience. It's shot down, not given. It might resurface later after many years under somebody's as the application. So the challenges for all of us is regulatory compliance, ethics, gatekeeping, ethical review bodies, but you saw there's a big question, who gatekeep the gatekeepers? That's a challenge remaining which has to be faced. So therefore need more capacity building in our part of the world. And again, data sharing and biobanking, as I told you during tsunami and after that, Establishing clear policies and procedures for collection, storage, sharing, and use research data, including genomic data, is important. Balancing the need of data sharing to promote scientific progress with protection of privacy, confidentiality, data ownership, and intellectual property is important. So, appointed by the Medical Research Council, I was fortunate to give leadership to this conference to share experience, particularly establishing a biobank in Sri Lanka as well, bringing the attention of funding agencies and decision makers about these issues which I mentioned. We managed to meet. I have put Professor Chandani Vanigatunga saying inclusiveness. Although we represented Sri Lanka, we wanted to ensure that Professor Vanigatunga represented SLMA and the SLMA Ethics Committee. Of course, she was selected on her merit, but she was there to support this. And we decided that data belongs to where it is collected. And that, with that decision, all the funding agencies in the West now follow this. If data is collected, we own it, the country which is collected. At that time, we had a Kiel IRD contract which was re-signed by giving us the ownership of data. And there were other outputs from this conference. I'll just show you them. A collection which is available for anybody to go through, equitable data sharing, all this. So, impact beyond publication, as I told you, and impact on the community. What do they think? So, we went and did some work to understand what Sri Lankan people think about research, their understanding. The finding was that research literacy was reasonable. Most knew, some they had understanding about what is the meaning of research. However, some thought the laboratory investigations they do is research. Key information they wanted if they are participating in research was for us to tell the objectives, importance, relevance, benefits to the individual, society, researchers' credibility and legitimacy, what is expected of participants, confidentiality, ability to withdraw at any time, and the majority was supportive of research. Research, it showed that they were supportive of research. So, you might think why we embarked on this journey of ethics. It started when we started the Sri Lankan Twin Registry. There was this headlines in the Daily Mirrors, double dealing of genetic twins, that we were starting the Sri Lankan Twin Registry to smuggle blood to pharmaceutical companies. We know who did it, but we didn't panic. Our strategy was engaging the public, awareness raising, developing guidelines, and the DNA was never sent abroad. In fact, we established a state-of-the-art genetic lab. And then, under Professor Jonathan Ives, he went and investigated about the people who participated in our research, genetic research, their understanding. And the emerging theme was, as I mentioned, what is most important, the issue of trust. This is the paper. All you need is trust. This is one of the verbatim quotation. The twin organization has existed for many years. Therefore, I thought that this was something genuine. When I was told that this is private, I felt a little bit uncertain. However, I felt that it is genuine, as you have been providing your services for several years. So, remember, trust is a byproduct of integrity. Sincerity, reliability, competent, consistency, and that's the moral story. So, final bits for this oration. So, the strategy of this long and difficult march was capacity building, networking, communication, and dissemination, storytelling. What we wanted through this oration is to showcase how our work, along with like-minded groups, contributed to the Global Health Research slogan that Global Health Research Partnerships and Equity, no more business as usual. It's not a passive compliance, it's an active commitment. This is the message to you all. Capacity building in all three pillars: research, ethics, community involvement and engagement is important. Team-wide training, especially on ethics and community involvement and engagement and policy engagement, not confined to early and mid-careers, even for middle grade and senior people, because these two are very important. CEI is a relatively new thing, and across partnerships on broad ethical challenges in health prioritization research. So we need more capacity building, not only locally, globally. And every researcher has a moral and ethical obligation to build capacity. We believe research of excellence can only be achieved through a holistic approach involving deep understanding, practice, and capacity development in all three pillars. So my message to you, research in isolation is not going to make that impact. Think about the other two pillars as well. And I'm happy to say, day before yesterday, this paper was accepted by BMJ leader. The whole story and the argument of key success of global health collaborations, research, ethics, and community engagement and involvement. Building capacity, the Nuffield Council of Bioethics in UK says it's very important, and we have done that. Extensive ethics awareness and training programs over the last 20 years. You can see from these pictures, continuous, consistent, sustainable work, not only in human subject ethics, medical, veterinary ethics. And as a result, we were invited by the UNESCO in 2017 to hold their international course in Sri Lanka over 5 days. 35 selected people from all over the world. And Buddhika was one of them, master trainers. We invited all the experts. Now that's one of the differences in our work. We are inclusive. We ensured that everyone who has a stake would have a role. We have carried out extensive work with Vietnam colleagues, Pakistan, India. I'm not going to bore you. And again, establishing guidelines. It's important because sometimes the guidelines are ambiguous and moral rights and wrongs are not universal. So contributing to these guidelines from our perspective. Why? Because ethics is a critical but supportive friend of research. It's not an enemy as some people perceive. Ethics can only enhance the quality of your research, like you are protecting your most important gold for women. So final bits, I'm going to share you a few slides to show you how we walk our talk, sharing experience from Global South in establishing this research institution from scratch, but with 3 pillars: capacity building, partnership for mutual benefits, not allowing for exploitation of our research participants, which is gold for us. Working for policy impact, which is very important. And these are our local, regional, and international collaborators. So we believe the role of North-South partnerships and collaborations are to, I'm sure my foreign guests wouldn't be too worried about this, decolonizing global health. This is a slogan in the West. It's not my slogan, but we need to walk our talk and give true value to this slogan. And for that, ethics and governance, capacity building has to be worldwide. It's still at infancy. To do that, leadership development is crucial. We need to develop our future leaders. That's part of a problem as a nation for us, isn't it? Allowing trees to grow taller than us, nurturing them, supporting them. I'm going to mention only about the ethics pillar. Introducing you to 3 leading people in this country who would carry our baton, work with you. Buddhika Fernando, a dental graduate from Peradeniya. She is an attorney at law. He has got a master's of public medical law and ethics. He has masters on economics and health policy. You can see how we handpick people and support them. She is the senior research associate of our ethics initiative. She just completed a PhD, ethically informed framework, bringing in ethics for managing patients with medically unexplained symptoms. And you can see how she integrated all her expertise, oral health, law, health economics, ethics, for this study in UK, which was unprecedented. It will have a tremendous impact from UK's perspective because this was not done before. Krishani Jayasinghe, Rajarata graduate, first class from ethics promotion, completed a master's in bioethics. She's just completing her PhD. She received a highly competitive global fellowship to attend this workshop on ethics of health research priority setting. She'll be there available to work with you all because this is very important, exploring ethics of global health. Dr. Janaka Pushpakumara, Dean Faculty of Medicine, we only supported him. I mean, all these 3 earned their life, we only supported them. And not only locally, we have done this for regional people, supporting them, and also working, bringing current global issues in ethics to Sri Lankan audience. We recently had this, because I heard even Health Secretary was talking about artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, some people perceive it as a panacea, but there are serious ethical issues. We need to be mindful. Professor Jonathan Ives, one of our collaborators, experts in the field, he said garbage in, garbage out. 6% research coming from our part of the world, data fed into artificial intelligence. What is out, evidence-based or evidence-biased? So be mindful about it. So we believe the role of North-South partnership is not one directional, it's bi-directional of transfer of knowledge, and that had been our focus. We work to bring modern knowledge into Sri Lanka, but at the same time ensure that we take it back to the north, global north. And you can see from this photograph, Sri Lankans, Professor Ajit Nahagawat, Sunil Dialvis, Nihala Besing. We took a team. We had a workshop. We speak what we speak here in everywhere else as well. It's not one thing in the north and one thing in the south. I mean locally and abroad as well. So we had this UK-wide workshop. We very clearly put forward our arguments and why we stand for these principles. We did it in Sri Lanka as well. I'm really grateful to all these Sri Lankan colleagues who support this work. And final few slides about community engagement and involvement, somewhat relatively new to you. There's an ethical dimension in that. That's why I brought in that here. Community involvement and engagement, or patient involvement and engagement, should happen throughout the research cycle, throughout. Right from the questionnaire designing to the end analyzing and disseminating. Particularly economic analysis, implementation, engaging the wider public, including industry, other stakeholders, which include policymakers and politicians. I'm glad that Professor Chandra Jayasumana is here. That is the missing link. And we did this work with the SLMA 2018, 2019. We have extensively done this outside the medical profession, thanks to Professor Duminda Gurige, who is carrying the banner in Rajarata University in a very big scale. And remember, that is the other crucial pillar, which is extremely important, because there's ethical dimensions to stakeholder engagement. because they are the beneficiaries of research as well. So people who benefit from research, you need to inculcate the concept that they have a moral obligation to contribute back, because it improved decision making health secretary, people who want services being involved, improved communication, increased understanding, and great understanding and support. At the IRD, we have a science journal for this, research journal, trilingual, and we have published all these. And the journal editor was a research assistant 15 years ago. He was awarded this Best Science Journalist Award. So that's how we support capacity building. Last week, we put forward this concept, Pariyeshana Waliන් තොර සංවර්ධනයක් නැත. You can recognize all this, National Science Foundation Chairman, Professor Alvis. And we brought for the first time, under one roof, politicians, printed policy, informed public, and we are following it. During the elections, we plan to bring this concept to all the political parties and commit them to say what would be their contribution to nation development through research. So limited time, I can't talk about public engagement, the importance, so probably it's another oration later. So finally, global health collaborations, it has to be mutual respect, equity, equitable authorships, shared goals, and team development. So the future directions, we are going to have this summer school in Kiel annually to take this concept back to our Western colleagues, that it's their moral and ethical obligation to support. We plan to establish a Sri Lankan Bioethics Association or Bioethics Society. We are planning to have an international ethics review committee comprising of local, regional, and international partners, because that itself has ethical issues which can be addressed proactively. We plan to have formal training courses in ethics, diploma, MScs, PhDs through these collaborating partners. And in summary, 3 pillars work for global benefits, making research a reality. That's our plan. And finally, it was all teamwork. History evidence of good teamwork, as Research Hackman says, output, you saw it. Collaborating ability, you saw that. Members' individual development, absolute must. No research in isolation. So this commitment to research, and I'm humbled to say that we received these 2 awards as a recognition, which helped us, motivated us further. And I apologize, this oration is breadth. The limitation is depth. Unfortunately, I couldn't make a deep dive because of the time factor. If I had to do that, this would be the deep dive over the years, and it will come as a coffee table book very soon to you all, because we believe this will have things to offer to younger budding future scientists. So we believe, go through, go over, go around, but never give up. It's very hard. It had been hard. But teamwork is absolutely essential. So, acknowledgements. I'm really grateful to the SLMA Oration Committee giving me this opportunity. I know it was very competitive and it was selected on merit. There were more than 10 scripts. That's why I feel very humbly proud, not for myself, for our team. Recognize, appreciate, and acknowledge the most important resource for us, the gold, the research participants. They are not just numbers. Recognize, appreciate, acknowledge all the contributors. Unfortunately, I can't put the names. They actively contributed to these journal articles, and unfortunately, one of our leaders we developed, Chesmal, died very prematurely. To my lifetime mentors, Professor Dinath Samarasinghe, Professor Nadavanna Surya, and Professor Anthony Mann. executive committee members, some of them are here. It was their support. We started as one room, and the people who can see here were contributors. Thank you very much. Sudat, Gominda, Dayaratna, you all are here. Dr. Kodituaku. Nihal had to come and go early. Our research council, comprising of people outside, not necessarily IRD. Asir is there from the ministry, Kalpani, KDU, who did a PhD with me. And our young budding scientists reading for PhDs across the world. So they are part of our research council, giving the baton to them. And our staff, the funding bodies, United Kingdom, I'm really grateful. That's my second home. I'm really grateful they allowed me over the last 25 years to spend more than 70% of my time here in Sri Lanka, Kings and Kiel. That's why we could do all this. And again, some of these names I mentioned, but I do have to acknowledge them because this is going to be public domain. Printed media is part of this thing, credible partners. So thank you very much. Some of them are represented here. Google images I have to acknowledge because I took some of the images from that. SLMA staff, sorry for this slide because I was waiting for photographs. I couldn't get it. Nadi, your name is not there. And to my late mother and father, finally, to my family, who walked through this journey with me. Grew up, so we have walked our talk at home as well. A big thank you. Last, to this beautiful land, our motherland. For the taxpayers who have spent their money for us and free education. A lot of people curse this country. I'm a proud Sri Lankan. We did well. Whatever the deficiencies, the strengths, very grateful. Thank you to all my teachers outside the medical profession. Sasara dakinaturu, nivan dakinaturu. Pinketa hela randirane yali upadinnata. Hetu vasana. Mata wagema obata. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us this morning. I would like to remind everyone that the registration table is now open for registration. Once again, thank you and please join us for lunch. Have a good day.